While America rested on its laurels, considering Germany a loyal ally, the threads of a new alliance were secretly being woven. Berlin, like an experienced strategist, defected to Beijing, concluding multi-billion-dollar deals and opening doors for Chinese investment. Did the U.S. miscalculate, failing to notice how its European partner was preparing a treacherous stab in the back? While American factories wither under the burden of closure and prices skyrocket, Germany generously shares its technological wealth with China. Key components for smartphones, sophisticated equipment, and advanced green technologies now flow like a river to China, strengthening its economic power. This sudden turn of events is not just a coincidence, but a carefully planned maneuver. Knowing about the impending American tariffs, Germany agreed with China in advance, leaving the U.S. in the dark. Has America been outsmarted, like a naive newcomer in a card game? If Germany has definitively sided with China, the world is on the threshold of a new era. Perhaps now the global balance of power has begun to irreversibly shift, foreshadowing turbulent times for the world hegemon. April 2nd, 2025, went down in history as a turning point, marking the beginning of an era of profound upheavals in the world order. The day that the Trump administration pompously called Liberation Day turned out quite differently. It triggered an unprecedented wave of animosity towards the United States on the world stage. The sudden barrage of trade tariffs that hit the world's leading economies instantly cut America off from its closest partners. This move, although predictable in light of Trump's long-standing statements, was striking in its scale, speed, and far-reaching consequences. The new tariffs fell like a bolt from the blue. Almost all imports from countries such as Germany, Japan, and South Korea were subject to duties ranging from a substantial 20% to a staggering 145%. Trump proclaimed this an act of economic patriotism, but in the eyes of the world community, including American companies, it looked like an act of economic self-destruction. It was not just about raising prices. These were the largest tariffs since World War II, threatening to destroy the global trading system that had been built with such difficulty for decades. Germany, one of the key trade and economic allies of the U.S., reacted immediately. Just a few days later, Germany began redirecting colossal volumes of export products, from high-precision instruments to modern electronics, directly to China. And with this, the United States lost something more than just goods. Trust was lost, partnerships were destroyed, and access to materials that underpinned the entire American industry was cut off. The logical question arises, why did Germany prefer to rush into the arms of China, rather than return to a proven ally, the United States? The American technology industry is critically dependent on German components, from microchips in smartphones to complex engines for industrial robots. German products, often remaining in the shadows, were the very invisible but key force that fueled American innovation. But when these goods were hit with 20% duties, German manufacturers simply cut off the oxygen. Their products became prohibitively expensive for the American market, and Germany found a new, generous buyer, China. In 2024, Germany invested a record $12 billion in the Chinese economy. This money did not just go to building factories abroad. It drained the lifeblood from American industry. Major players such as Siemens and Bosch wasted no time. Germany reoriented its economic vector, concluding new agreements with Chinese partners and redirecting supply flows. The export direction shifted eastward, dragging strategic priorities along with it. By mid-spring, the American economy felt the first echoes of these changes. In Texas, Michigan, and Kentucky, assembly lines of enterprises stopped. The reason for this was not a decline in consumer interest, but a shortage of components. Entire industrial centers, whose life was inextricably linked with production, suddenly froze. It was not just an economic crisis, but a real industrial collapse. And it was not limited to financial losses. Years of trade confrontation and political pressure from the United States revealed one disturbing feature of the American approach: unpredictability. At the same time, China demonstrated the opposite qualities: sustainable economic growth, transparent trade rules, and no threat of introducing new duties on the eve of each election. What else did the U.S. lose as a result of this unexpected turn? By acquiring a strategic ally in Germany, China won not only in the trade war, but also changed the rules of the game on the world stage. Chinese enterprises, equipped with high-quality and affordable German components, have been operating at full capacity. According to information provided by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, April saw an impressive 12% increase in exports of electronics and machinery. Notably, Chinese goods not only surged into Asian countries but also triumphantly conquered global markets, offering prices that American manufacturers found extremely difficult to compete with. At the same time, China actively strengthened its trade infrastructure, laying new railway routes connecting Europe and Asia, expanding port capacities along the new Silk Road, and forging strategic alliances with leading German logistics and shipping companies. It was no longer just about increasing production volumes but also about establishing control over global logistics flows, while the United States remained on the sidelines of this process. American businesses faced serious difficulties. Prices for imported components soared, and delivery times increased significantly. As a result, American companies began to lose market share not only in China but also in Europe and Latin America. In some cases, they were unable to fulfill incoming orders. In an attempt to isolate China, America may have inadvertently isolated itself from future development prospects. Germany's shift towards China has become a strategic move, especially in the field of green technologies. Germany, a recognized leader in clean energy from solar panels to electric vehicles, sees cooperation with China as an opportunity for further development and strengthening its position in the global market. China could not stand aside from the global race for technological leadership. In recent years, the Chinese side has invested over $1 billion in joint research and development projects with German companies, seeking to create breakthrough solutions in the field of batteries, hydrogen fuel systems, and new-generation solar panels. This collaboration has created more than 7,000 jobs, mainly in China, where German engineering expertise has been implemented in Chinese factories. One of the landmark examples was the partnership between Volkswagen and the Chinese company BioID, aimed at developing a new platform for electric vehicles. Production facilities were fully deployed in China, while technological developments were carried out in Germany. The result was a new wave of electric vehicles in which American companies could not participate. While the Sino-German alliance gained momentum, American companies, such as Lucy Motors, faced serious delays in deliveries, reaching several months. The U.S. Department of Energy reported a decrease in the number of projects in the field of clean energy by almost 30% in just one quarter. Even government funding proved insufficient to reverse the negative trend. In Tennessee, a solar power plant, built with state support, is now abandoned and desolate. The reason is simple: the cost of components skyrocketed, burying the project under the rubble of economic realities. In Colorado, a hydrogen plant, which had recently shown promise, was forced to cut staff, facing insurmountable difficulties in acquiring the necessary equipment. Once, the tariffs introduced by the Trump administration were to become a symbol of national pride, a banner of economic independence. They promised protection for American workers, the revival of industry, and the establishment of fair trade rules. That was the intention. But the reality turned out to be cruel. American production slowed down, ceding ground to competitors. Allies, once loyal partners, began to seek new alliances, new paths of development. The ambitious plans of the United States in the field of clean energy failed to materialize, withering on the vine. The resulting vacuum was immediately filled by China, rapidly strengthening its position on the world stage. The United States, instead of the declared trade war, actually capitulated, ceding strategically important territories. Now China confidently occupies a leading position, dictating its terms of the game. What awaits the world ahead? What will tomorrow be like? One thing is certain: if April 2nd becomes a day of liberation, then it is likely that on this day the world was freed from the former American domination. And one of the main victims of this global upheaval was Tesla, a company that has become a symbol of American innovation and technological superiority. The dizzying fall of Tesla is a sight worthy of a chronicler's pen. Not so long ago, Elon Musk's company proudly sat on the throne of the electric vehicle industry, and Europeans applauded its daring style, hurricane speed, and environmental friendliness. However, 2025 became a fateful year for Tesla. In Germany, the heart of the European electric car market, sales plummeted by a staggering 76% in February. Across the European Union, the January decline reached 45%, despite an overall 30% growth in the electric vehicle market. As Tesla loses ground, European automotive giants like Volkswagen, Renault, and Peugeot are rapidly gaining momentum. Their strengths lie in more affordable prices, fresh designs, and impeccable service. However, it's not just about market conditions. Elon Musk himself is a factor. His flamboyant behavior has sparked outrage in Europe. A survey conducted in the UK revealed that 59% of potential electric car buyers are now consciously avoiding Tesla. This is due to Musk's support for the German far-right party, Alternative for Germany, and his political statements, which Europeans consider dangerous and radical. Musk seems to have transitioned from being just a CEO to a walking scandal. Once, his name resonated worldwide, embodying progress and innovation. He launched rockets into space, dreamed of a green future for the planet, and inspired millions. He was welcomed by European leaders, and his opinion was valued by environmental activists. But this era of triumph is rapidly fading. In early 2025, Musk suddenly criticized the European Union's climate policy, calling the Green Deal nothing short of a disaster and a generous gift to China. He openly expressed support for Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and even participated in financing her nationalist party. This move caused an uproar in Brussels and alienated many Europeans committed to democratic values and environmental protection. The reaction was immediate. European authorities began to curtail support programs, freeze contracts, and initiate audits of Tesla's tax and labor practices. Consumers also responded. For many Europeans, Musk ceased to be a symbol of progress, becoming an embodiment of a new wave of radicalism. And they are voting against it by rejecting his products. But these aren't the only difficulties that have befallen Tesla. The company's position was further complicated by Donald Trump's imposition of 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. In response, the European Union retaliated by imposing new duties on American goods, from Levi's jeans to Boeing aircraft, totaling $23 billion. These blows were aimed not at creating a facade, but at causing significant harm. Boeing, already facing declining orders, is now forced to heed alarming signals from suppliers warning of rising costs and inevitable layoffs. Even the United States' staunch ally, Canada, did not stand aside, retaliating with a counterstrike. In an unprecedentedly harsh move, Ottawa imposed tariffs affecting a wide range of American products, from agricultural to defense. Chrystia Freeland, Canada's Minister of Transport and Intergovernmental Affairs, described the U.S. actions as a direct attack on North American trade, stating that they could destroy decades of painstakingly built economic cooperation. The consequences of these measures began to multiply like a snowball rolling down a mountain. American farmers faced the loss of markets, automobile factories revised their forecasts downward, and anxiety grew in society. All of this may be just a prelude to a much larger collapse in world trade. Canada, once considered the closest trading partner of the United States, fired a warning shot that echoed even in Beijing, prompting reflection on the coming changes. While Canada and Europe moved to retaliatory measures, countries like Mexico and Brazil chose to take a wait-and-see approach, opting for a more cautious strategy. In response to U.S. protectionist measures, various response strategies began to emerge in world trade. Mexico, an important supplier of steel to the United States, preferred the path of diplomacy, calling for dialogue to avoid escalating the conflict. However, the Mexican government made it clear that retaliatory measures were inevitable if negotiations failed. Brazil held a similar position, with its leaders condemning the American tariffs as unfair and filing a complaint with the World Trade Organization. Behind the scenes, Brazilian steel and agricultural industries pressured the government to take tougher action, despite their desire to maintain partnerships with Washington. Canada's turnaround was the most notable. In response to new tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, Ottawa began reorienting its economic policy. China immediately offered its services, and Canada began expanding trade ties with Beijing. The Canadian government's retaliatory plan made it clear that the country did not intend to remain in a vulnerable position. However, behind the scenes of the tariff battles, a much deeper and more significant process is unfolding. Canada is reshaping its foreign trade doctrine for the long term. As early as the first quarter of 2025, Canadian exports to China soared by an impressive 42%, with energy resources, food, and strategically important rare earth metals leading this growth. Simultaneously, there is an influx of Chinese investment in Canadian port infrastructure and logistics networks, especially in British Columbia. Flows of Canadian wheat and pork, previously oriented towards the American market, are now being directed to China in massive volumes. These steps not only diversify Canada's economic ties, but also create a reliable foothold for China on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. The political establishment in the United States had hoped that the tariff war would weaken the Chinese economy, But in practice, the effect seems to be the opposite. Chinese industry is experiencing unprecedented growth, driven not so much by free access to Western markets as by the need to survive under external pressure. The imposed restrictions have become a wake-up call for Beijing, especially in the strategically important field of semiconductor technology. China, once significantly behind the US and Taiwan, has made a rapid leap in developing its own chip production. Over the past year and a half, new modern factories equipped with domestically produced photolithography equipment have been launched in the country. The latest Longsing V4 chip, the fruit of Chinese engineering thought, is triumphantly being implemented in government structures, the military, and artificial intelligence systems. The People's Republic of China, decisively overcoming dependence on foreign technologies, is directing colossal investments into the development of its own technological ecosystem. Against the backdrop of the rise of a new technological superpower, Canadian companies are showing increasing interest in establishing partnerships and conducting joint developments with Chinese colleagues. The Government of Canada, in turn, is demonstrating a willingness to cooperate, easing some restrictions on technology transferred to China. This move can be seen as another sign of the erosion of trust in Washington. Canada may be just the first element in the emerging mosaic, but it is unlikely to be the last. More and more allies of the United States of America are seeking new partners, rethinking their priorities, and discovering new horizons. In this regard, a logical question arises. How long can the United States afford to pursue a tough, red-line policy, risking being left alone on the world stage? The geopolitical landscape is rapidly changing, and in order not to miss key turns in modern history, it is necessary to constantly keep abreast of events.